Hello once again and welcome to the Prince Magnum channel where hot rodding and romance do coexist. I'm your host Prince Magnum. Welcome once again to Off the Chain, and this particular video in question is a video game theory that I've had for quite some time and to my knowledge has not been covered by any other YouTube channel. I could be wrong, but regardless, we're going to tackle this particular video game theory right now. That being said, The Legend of Zelda, one of my all-time favorite video game series that's been offered from Nintendo since 1986 to current date. Several titles on many consoles, even handheld consoles, keep making their way to the popular culture even as we speak right now. The last one that was released was none other than Breath of the Wild, and you can play it on the Nintendo Switch, which is exactly the video footage you're seeing right now. That being said, the most iconic weapon from the Legend of Zelda series is none other than the Master Sword. The Master Sword, the sword that seals the darkness. In this series, we're going to ask the question, in the timeline, did the Master Sword receive an upgrade that we don't know about or have forgotten to time just because the last upgrade happened in one of the original games? So, in order to actually tackle this subject, to talk about this particular upgrade that the Master Sword could have gotten, we're going to have to decide where Breath of the Wild fits in on the timeline, and we're going to have to travel back in time and take a look at the original video game series for the NES, The Legend of Zelda, and Zelda 2: Link's Adventures. So, without further ado, let's get underway. The original Legend of Zelda for the NES that came out in 1986. I wish many of you who are watching this video were around when this game was brand new. It was very epic for all of us young gamers in the 1980s. That being said, the original two games had a feature that we had not experienced as young gamers. It had the ability to save your progress. Before that time, you either A, had to beat the game in one sitting, or B, you had to get so far along in the game that you got a code, and when you had to stop the game, you started it back up, put the code in, and you could pick up where you left off. So Legend of Zelda and Legend of Zelda 2 had the ability to save your progress. Again, a very new feature for the time. Now, all that being said, the original two games were the only ones, to my knowledge, that that were really connected at that time. Now, I know later games they say are connected. I've listened to the stories, but whatever. Because of this, basically, the timeline is a very convoluted mess. Such a convoluted mess that it really deserves its very own video at why it's a convoluted mess. So, knowing that fact, we're really only going to take a look at Breath of the Wild and the original two games for the NES. Now, after the original two games, we know that the Super NES came out, and the next title for the game was A Link to the Past. Now, at that time, when Nintendo was asked about it and that sort of thing, they basically said, okay, it's a prequel. Again, the Legend of Zelda timeline is a convoluted mess, which you can see the picture right here. Now, as the making of Twilight Princess, Nintendo has not updated the timeline since 2017. Now, with the release of Breath of the Wild, Nintendo has kind of left it up to us, the fans of the series, to kind of decide where Breath of the Wild fits in. Now, many of us really believe that Breath of the Wild comes in before the original two games, finally connecting the timelines together right there. Okay? Where that arrow is where a lot of us feel that it comes in, and it actually connects the three different timelines, finally reuniting them into one. Now, there is evidence to support this. The first bit of evidence is in Breath of the Wild, we know that Link lost the fight to Calamity Ganon. Hyrule is in a state of complete disarray. Okay? The Temple of Time, one of the first things that you see when you walk out, as you're seeing in the video right now, one of the first things that you notice about the Temple of Time is it's in ruins. When you get to the original game, there is no Temple of Time, which suggests that the Temple of Time was never rebuilt after the events of Breath of the Wild. This is important because in Breath of the Wild, you don't pick the Master Sword up from the Temple of Time as you would have done in several of the other installments to the Legend of Zelda series. This is important because we'll talk about that later. So, where do you get the Master Sword? Well, you pick it up from the Deku Tree, which, again, this suggests that after the events of Breath of the Wild, the Temple of Time was never rebuilt. Do you need further evidence? Well, in Breath of the Wild, there's still villages. Life is still thriving. It's doing very well. In the original game, if you do find any people, they're usually living in the side, in hollowed out trees, or they're living in the side of mountains, inside of caves. There's very few people. Now, we know the real reason why in the original game, you're just asking an awful lot of the original 8-bit era. They just didn't have that sort of technology. You were just asking way too much of the programmers at that time and the platform that they had to work with. But for the purposes of this theory and placing Breath of the Wild, this is kind of important. So, because the Master Sword wasn't in the Temple of Time as it has been in previous installments, and where it might be on the timeline, and where this takes place, this is very, very important as we take a look at this. Now that we have established some sort of a theory where Breath of the Wild fits in, with using the events of Breath of the Wild, we're now going to take a look at what happened to the Master Sword after Breath of the Wild and the upgrade that it got. Now that we have established, in theory, where the events of Breath of the Wild come in on the timeline, it is important to note again that the Temple of Time is in ruins. In the events of Breath of the Wild, where do you get the Master Sword? You pick it up from the Deku Tree. The Deku Tree has been keeping an eye on the Master Sword for 100 years, waiting for Link to awaken in the Shrine of Resurrection. This is important to remember. The Master Sword in every other incarnation of the Legend of Zelda series, when it has been picked up by Link, usually is picked up in the Temple of Time. This is important for its restorative time, for it to restore to its original condition, while it awaits for Link's reincarnation. Since, at the end of Breath of the Wild, that the Master Sword did not return to the Temple of Time as it normally does, it is in a weakened state, just not as weak as it was in Breath of the Wild. In Breath of the Wild, you'll pick up the Master Sword, you'll get out there, you'll do all this crazy fighting, and all of a sudden, the Master Sword breaks into a shower of blue sparks, and you got to wait about 10 minutes for it to restore itself. So it is in a weakened condition, but it's strong enough to withstand heavy combat by the time you get to the original game. Let's take a look at the Master Sword in the original game. When you start it up, this is the title screen. You give it a few moments, and it goes into as much of a cinematic as you can get from 1986, and the game gives you a little bit of back history. Now, at this point in the video, you are more than welcome to go ahead and stop the video right here and kind of get some of the backstory on the original Legend of Zelda game. Now, that being said, it now goes into kind of like the treasures that you'll find in game. And pretty much it's what you typically find in all of the games for the most part. But then all of a sudden, right there's 3 swords. Very unusual. We know that this starter sword has to be the Master Sword in a very weakened and tarnished condition, just like you would have found in Breath of the Wild when you see the Master Sword all banged up and everything. It's a little different. Bear in mind, the 8-bit era, there was still a lot of imagination us gamers had to use. But we know that it's the Master Sword because it's able to throw the sword blast that it does. When you take a look at the normal weapons that you pick up in Breath of the Wild, they're not able to throw that sword blast. Even really awesome looking swords, that isn't the Master Sword. The Master Sword is able to throw that sword blast if you have a full lifeline in Breath of the Wild. This continues over to the original game. Link is able to pick up the original brown and green sword and begin throwing sword blast right out of the gate. It is the Master Sword, but it's still weakened. So you take out the first boss in the first labyrinth, and you go and pick up a couple more heart containers. However you do it, you might go on to the next, labyrinth, whatever, or you'll go find a couple hidden heart containers. You go to this man on top of a mountain, and you pick up what the game calls the White Sword. Now, looking at the White Sword, we know that that's the Master Sword, okay? It's the Master Sword restored to its original condition before the events of Breath of the Wild, okay? Again, the Master Sword did not return to the Temple of Time. It has to be restored somehow, and the theory that supports this is when you pick up an item in the original Legend of Zelda, there's no item left behind. Now, this could be debunked with the magic shield, but, again, you could just say your starter shield is just morphed into the magic shield. Like, that particular merchant puts a spell on, and all of a sudden it's the magic shield. So that, there's where that theory falls in. Again, us early gamers had to use a lot of imagination. So, there you have it. The Master Sword restored to its original condition before the events of Breath of the Wild, without the use of the Temple of Time. However, where the final upgrade is when you look at that third sword, the Magic Sword. This is the final upgrade. The Master Sword is just not strong enough. We know that in the events of the original game for the NES, which comes just before the final game in the timeline, we know how bad it is, because that sword now has to receive, the Master Sword has to receive one last upgrade. And that upgrade, it turns it into what the original game calls the Magic Sword, okay? And we see it again in, in part of that title screen cinematic scroll down. We don't see it in any other game. We don't see this upgrade in any other game, which again supports that Zelda 2, The Adventures of Link, is the final game in the timeline that supports that, as Nintendo has said. Because we don't, and to go along with that, we don't see any more upgrades for the Magic Sword or the Master Sword Plus in any other game. We always see the Master Sword, that blue and white sword we see in all the other games in some way, shape, or form. So now that we have established that, when you opened up Legend of Zelda 2, you see this wonderful, this wonderful 8-bit era landscape and the Magic Sword, or if you will, again, the Master Sword Plus, shoved into a stone. That's the sword that Link uses throughout the game. There is no more upgrades. The only thing you can upgrade is Link, or you can pick up magic spells, which of course prevents the return of Ganon. It's kind of that, if you know anything about the game, you know that Ganon's minions need Link's blood to bring him back, which of course, when you beat the game, Ganon does not return. He stays sealed away. So there you have it, the final upgrade for the Master Sword that a lot of people have actually forgotten about over time, just because these games are very old. We're talking over 30 years of Legend of Zelda content, and that's a lot of content to pour through. But it is interesting content to pour through. For the record, I've not played all the games, but I have played Breath of the Wild, and I have played Legend of Zelda and Zelda 2 Link's Adventures. So there's my theory. Okay. Now, for the purposes of debate, if you have a different take on this, by all means, you're welcome to leave it in the comments box below. Obviously, please be respectful of it, but you're welcome to debate this if you'd like. If you like regardless of where you stand on this theory, if you did like it, be sure to smash that like button as hard as you possibly can, so YouTube knows that they really should push this video to other people who enjoy Legend of Zelda. If you didn't like it, smash the dislike button twice. If you're not subscribed to the Prince Magnum channel, definitely, I will say again and again and again, this is definitely a time to do so, because we're doing all sorts of amazing things. So much so that I would hate for y'all to miss out. So hit that subscribe button and hit the bell icon. You'll be notified every time we do a brand new video. Also, be sure to check out my partner, Mr. Sketch Scars of Sketch Squad TV, and show him some love. He's not been streaming a whole lot since the making of this video, but when he does, I always appreciate to see his work. He is the pioneer of 4G LTE mobile live streaming. Also, be sure to check out the following people that are right here. Okay, these people don't just stream video games. They don't just throw up video game content or just throw up car videos. They're really they're really putting out their personalities, and these personalities, by no stretch of the imagination, these personalities are really awesome. They're really awesome people that they're attached to. Every last one of them I love in some way, shape, or form, just because they're that awesome. So be sure to check these people out and show them some love as I have. And if you've not checked out the Patreon account, be sure to do so. If you have anything to donate, it's always appreciated. So go to patreon.com/Prince Magnum, and if you're able to donate, please do so. If not, hey, just leave an awesome comment if you'd like. All right, that brings us to the usual spot. Be sure to get out there and work on a project. Do something with yourself, folks. Remember, idle hands and a creative mind go together like oil and water. If you have a sweetheart, sweep them off their feet and do something special for them today. And as always, for every last one of you out there, if no one out there has told you that they love you. Prince Magnum does. God bless you, and have a happy 24. Thank you.
Man. Wow, man, freaked out.